My name's Manjeet Kaur.
My name's Gurnaam Singh.
Welcome to the One Show. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
A really warm welcome, even on this very rainy day in Birmingham, to all the Akal Channel viewers. ਜਿੱਥੇ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਅਕਾਲ ਚੈਨਲ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਆ ਔਰ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਵੀ 106 ਮੁਲਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਕਾਲ ਚੈਨਲ ਦੇਖਿਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਤੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਸਟ੍ਰੇਲੀਆ ਤੱਕ ਸਾਰੇ ਹੀ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਵੀ ਸਿੱਖ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵਸਦੇ ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨਾਨ ਸਿੱਖ ਵੀ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਚੈਨਲ ਨੂੰ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਆ ਜੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਕਹਿ ਦਈਏ ਵੀ ਮਿਲੀਅਨਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਸ ਟਾਈਮ ਤੇ ਅਕਾਲ ਚੈਨਲ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਦਰਸ਼ਕ ਜੁੜੇ ਨੇ ਔਰ ਫੇਸਬੁੱਕ ਤੇ ਵੀ ਸਾਡਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਲਾਈਵ ਆ ਤੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇੰਟਰਨੈਟ ਤੇ ਵੀ ਦੇਖ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ Sky 843 ਤੇ One Show live ਅੱਜ ਇੱਕ ਵਿਸ਼ੇਸ਼ very special One Show today. We're going to be talking about something that I guess we've kind of forgotten really. 1845 to 1849 represents a very eventful and pivotal moment, and I would argue not only in Sikh history but arguably in world history. But tragically very little is actually known or spoken about this period, this very short period. I'm of course talking about the Anglo-Sikh Wars. The two wars, the first one was 1845 to 1846. There was a gap of 2 years, and then 1848 to 1849. And the two campaigns were fought between the Sikhs and the British, or more accurately, with the East India Company, who had their own private army. And they resulted in the conquest and annexation by the British of the Punjab in northern India and the loss of the Sikh Empire, which was established under the Sikh Emperor Maharaja Ranjit Singh, who ruled from 1801 to 1839. So we can see soon after his death, the whole kind of empire collapses, and we will certainly we will be exploring what happened in those six years really after his death, where all his achievements, not to mention the royal family itself, the whole court was lay in ruins as well. But to commemorate this history, we've got this fantastic exhibition. एक बहुत ही कमाल दा exhibition हैगा जो कि आप मेरे ख्याल screen ते भी देख सकते हैं. It's called the Anglo-Sikh Wars, Battles, Treaties and Relics, 1845 to 1849. ਤੁਸੀਂ leaflet ਤੇ ਵੀ ਦੇਖ ਸਕਦੇ हैं. और ਇਹ ਲੈਸਟਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੈਗਾ ਤੇ ਜਿਸ ਸਮੇਂ ਕਿ 11 ਮਾਰਚ ਇਹ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਹੋਣਾ. And so there'll be an exhibition, but there'll also be lectures, series of lectures over that period, 6 lectures, and you can go on the website www.anglo-sikhwars.com ਤਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ book ਵੀ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਸੀ ਔਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ information ਲੈ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ. So in today's program we will be talking Manjeet about the exhibitions and the Anglo-Sikh Wars as well, and really trying to maybe just give a bit of a glimpse into the whole kind of period, because it's really important. And we've got a great panel as well to help us out.
Definitely have. Yeah.
So I think we should welcome the panel and get on with the show. If I start from on my right hand side, again, all the panelists are they're not new to the One Show, but it's difficult to get them in. But we've managed to drag them. Gurinder Singh Mann on my sajjat, Gurinder Singh Mann. He's a Leicester-born Sikh scholar and historian, and he holds an MA in South Asian Studies, South Asian religion from De Montfort University. As I say, he's a researcher in Sikh history, artifact and scriptures, and has published extensively. He's also head of the Sikh Museum Initiative, which is an online Sikh museum, and with others he also convenes the annual international research conference at the Sikh Research Conference at the University of Warwick. So Gurinder, welcome to the show.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
But got to the left again, another one of our regulars, Kartar Singh. So as many will know, Kartar is the first Sikh lead chaplain in the UK and has been extensively involved in promoting positive interfaith relationships, and works with all the interfaith groups. As I say, he's appeared on television numerous times, representing the Sikh kind of arguments really. And of course he's appeared on the Kal channel, the premier channel. And so Kartar, welcome to the show.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
And Taranjeet Singh, who's a rare breed really of Sikhs who are doing amazing things with technologies. He's an expert in 3D technologies and has worked as a 3D designer and visualizer within the architectural engineering industries for 12 years, but he's applying those kind of insights, those skills really onto Sikh relics. And we had the program before where he was not only creating 3D design within cyberspace, but actually doing 3D printing as well. And he's been modeling lots of objects and has been working closely with the exhibition as well. So, Tanjit Singh, welcome. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa. Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Gurinder, we'll just kick off with you then. I mean, we will go back to talking about the Anglo-Sikh Wars, battles, treaties and relics project. Just very briefly, what is it all about?
Okay, so thank you for having us on the show. Again, we're very looking forward to coming on the show every time, so we can introduce and let tell people about Sikh history, tell people about what we're doing. So what the Sikh Museum Initiative did was, I think it was just under 2 years ago, we actually were looking at a project to actually do. And it was interesting because we'd already seen so many different projects related to World War I and World War II, and also related to how Indians and Sikhs had actually, been part of this fighting force. However, every single time we were actually looking at these events, there's no mention of the Anglo-Sikh Wars. It was a case of like people saying, 1 minute you've got an empire, next minute you're fighting for the British. But there was no middle bit. It explains why Sikhs, after the Anglo-Sikh War became part of it.
It's not just a punctuation mark in history, is it? It's a gaping gap in history.
It's a massive gap.
Empty, been left empty.
Absolutely massive, because when we look at Sikh history all the way from, say, Guru Nanak Ji, all the way down to, say, times now, we tend to find that there's always lots about the Sikh period in terms of like the Gurus. Then there's quite a lot in terms of a little bit about Maharaja Ranjit Singh. Then there's that Singh Sabha movement, and then it moves on, and in terms of 1984 or so forth. All of a sudden, the Anglo-Sikh War seems to get absolutely kind of, just marginalised and sidelined. There is reasons for it as well. I think for Sikhs' perspective, because it was
lost.
Because it was an empire that we lost.
You don't celebrate your defeats.
You don't. But what you do do is you actually learn from your lessons. I think that's a very
That's a really good point, actually. I just maybe Gurtar, just coming onto that, because I know that you've been involved with the project as well, and I know that the National Heritage Lottery Fund has funded this. Is that right? And so just give us a sense of the scale of the project and the kind of museum in Leicester as well.
Well, I think the idea about looking at military museums was actually to create a physical space where we can host it, much like any exhibition that goes into a museum. We wanted an opportunity for local communities, local people who are interested in the military, to go in and actually see an exhibition about the Anglo-Sikh Wars. In terms of...
So what the range of artefacts and things that you'll have there?
Well, there'll be quite a lot of things that are worth seeing through my work with the Anglo-Sikh Wars project. We've been to places where I suspect many Sikh historians have not been yet, seen artifacts from the Anglo-Sikh War period, and it's really quite a fascinating experience because we are here at an opportunity to look at things that the Sikh community hasn't seen before, whether it is artifacts relating to the army, the military. I mean, some of the things that I've seen included battle plans that actually were used at the time during the
So have these been kind of like dug out of the British War Museum, Imperial War Museum? Is that kind of, where has it been hidden, or is it been brought from other exhibitions, other museums?
Well, what we have to do, I think this is what the Sikh Museum System is primarily about, it's finding what is out there, doing the course, spending the time, trawling the archives, contacting all the different organisations to find out what bits of information do we have, because our history is there, it's just we haven't collated it. The idea of a Sikh Museum Initiative, it's about letting the Sikh community in the UK and anyone else know what is there relating to Sikh history that's available in Britain.
And Tanjit, I know that with your kind of 3D design as well, one of the things that you're doing is it's another way of bringing history back to life. And are you trying to recreate some of those battle scenes or some of the kind of objects as well? Is that part of it?
I think the idea is that obviously some things have been lost. We don't have access to them. So we are looking at different ways of being able to share these with the Sangat to educate people and for people to experience these objects that have been lost.
So that you will be creating some for this exhibition then?
Definitely, we've created some 3D artifacts which we can't get hold of or we can't actually put in the exhibition due to various reasons. But it's about making it interesting for young people to come along, have a play with these things and learn about them, and actually for a child to have a look at an object or hold it in their hands or be able to kind of control it or look at it, it's a very powerful thing because it connects them to their history. And when these things are hidden away or lost, then we will lose that connection.
We will come back to some of your work later on in the programme, but Gurinder, just one more thing. I know that you've got a couple of slides, a couple of pictures actually that you've brought in pencil drawings. Just to give us a flavour, maybe you could hold those up to the screen and just say something about those, because they're quite profound. I think you could maybe just hold it up to the camera.
Okay, so
maybe if you can hold it, and then maybe the camera crew can just zoom it in. Just tell us about that one.
Okay, so
ਇਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਦੱਸੋ ਤੇ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਚ ਵੀ ਮੇਰੇ ਖਿਆਲ ਸਾਡੇ ਵਿਊਅਰ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਚ ਵੀ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਆਪਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਦੀ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਲਈ ਹਾਂਜੀ
ਤਾਂ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਫੋਟੋ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਇਹ ਪੁਰਾਣੇ ਜਿਹਦਾ ਨਿਊਜ਼ਪੇਪਰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਛਪਦੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਸੀਗੇ ਲੰਡਨ ਇਲਸਟ੍ਰੇਟਡ ਨਿਊਜ਼ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਸੀਗੇ ਉਹ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਇੰਗਲੈਂਡ ਤੋਂ ਛਪਦੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਸੀਗੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਉਹ ਜਦੋਂ ਛਪਣ ਲੱਗ ਪਏ ਸੀ ਜਦੋਂ ਇਹ ਵੋਰ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਹੋਈ ਸੀ ਤਾਂ ਆ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਡਿਪਿਕਸ਼ਨ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਰਾਜਾ ਸ਼ੇਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਦੀ ਆ ਰਾਜਾ ਸ਼ੇਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਅਟਾਰੀ ਵਾਲਾ ਨੂੰ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਇਹ ਸੈਕੰਡ ਐਂਗਲੋ ਸਿੱਖ ਵੋਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਮਿਨੈਂਸ ਹੋਇਆ ਸੀ ਉਹਦੇ ਤਾਂ ਇਹਨੇ ਜੰਗ ਕੀਤੇ ਸੀ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਰਾਮਨਗਰ ਚਿਲੀਅਨਵਾਲਾ ਨਾਲੇ ਫਿਰ ਗੁਜਰਾਤ
So how many years became impact then?
So basically this is the second Anglo-Sikh war took place between 1848 and 1849 and what happened with Raja Sher Singh was he didn't have to take part in the first Anglo-Sikh war but it was him and his father Chattar Singh.
We will come to that,
Yeah, we
but
will
what's
come
the
back to
provenance
it.
of
Yeah.
this? Is this a recent drawing or is this
No.
what's the provenance of that?
This is actually a drawing which was done by the British at that particular time. So because they the illustrated London News was actually
So this was literally like a war report.
Exactly. They had war correspondents out there in the Punjab. So literally when this war took place, they were sending dispatches back to the UK and these newspapers were actually being printed. So a second one which I've got in front of me is of a Britisher called Major Broadfoot. Now he's actually significant because he's actually cited as being one of the causes of the Anglo-Sikh War by actually causing trouble. And he was actually killed not too long after the actual Anglo-Sikh War started basically. And another Britisher actually said, well, it served him right because he was actually kind of cited as being one of the instigators of actually causing the war.
So I mean, I think this is really interesting because the job of the historian is to uncover history, and so we've got some of the British correspondence there. We've obviously got some of the British soldiers keeping records, keeping diaries and things. What other kind of ways in which do we kind of get some kind of accurate reporting other than the oral tradition that we've got with on the Sikh side? It's mostly Tardis. They passed it down. I can remember their thing, but how have we got accurate kind of
well, I think within the Sikh community, oral tradition has always been the way in which information has been passed. So if you go into the Nahang Dals, who would have people who spoke about those times when the Nahang Singhs were hunted down by the British, who were chased down because they refused to surrender. The other sources, the interesting thing
that's kind of poetic kind of Diwars and things like that.
From the British side, it's very interesting, the pictures that we've shown. If you look at first-hand artistic sketches on the battlefields, they are almost a snapshot, almost if a person took a picture of that moment, and it gives you an insight to the history of the time. It's sort of seen as a artistic first-hand source. So rather than it being a written report, it gives you a sketch, an image of exactly what's happened. And some of the sketches we've seen have been during the first Anglo-Sikh wars, where the British have felt that they're almost about to be defeated, and it's just them lying in their camp. It's been
but
quite
these, I mean, that's interesting because this is for a British audience. These and so. Because मैं सोचता था कि they're actually showing the Sikhs in quite a lot of glory there, but presumably the message is how glorious were the British victory to defeat these glorious warriors.
I mean, obviously there's going to be that's in context to actually say, well, we're fighting a military power. Basically. So for them to actually show them it's the Sikhs in a glorious way is actually part of the narrative, basically. To actually say, well, they were a big military force, so to speak, and then we were able to defeat them. But the key point is they were good at identifying the leaders, and obviously this is actually fascinating picture. I really kind of like the way it's been drawn. I mean, Taran were actually discussing this a few weeks back. It's very intricate in terms of the actual regalia that Sher Singh is actually wearing as well, when you look in detail. So it's a really
That's amazing.
accurate picture.
So ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਦਰਸ਼ਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਅੱਜ ਐਂਗਲੋ ਸਿੱਖ ਜੋ ਵਾਰਸ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਜੋ ਕਿ 1845 ਤੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ 1849 ਦੋ ਜੰਗਾਂ ਲੱਗੀਆਂ ਸੀਗੀਆਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਤੇ ਅੱਜ ਵਿਚਾਰ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਐਗਜ਼ੀਬਿਸ਼ਨ ਲੈਸਟਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮੈਂ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ ਫੇਰ ਦੱਸ ਦਵਾਂ ਐਂਗਲੋ ਸਿੱਖ ਵਾਰਸ ਬੈਟਲਸ ਟ੍ਰੀਟੀਜ਼ ਐਂਡ ਰੈਲਿਕਸ 1845 to 1849 ਇਹ ਲੈਸਟਰ ਮਿਊਜ਼ੀਅਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ 11 ਮਾਰਚ ਤੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ 4 ਜੂਨ ਤੱਕ ਇਹ ਐਗਜ਼ੀਬਿਸ਼ਨ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਦੇਖੋ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਔਰ ਵੈਬਸਾਈਟ ਤੇ ਜੈਸੇ ਲੈਕਚਰਸ ਵੀ ਹੋਣੇ ਆ ਔਰ ਅੱਜ ਜੋ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਸਾਡਾ ਸਮਾਂ ਵੀ ਅੱਜ ਥੋੜਾ ਆ ਅਸੀਂ ਹੁਣ ਜੋ ਕਿ ਐਂਗਲੋ ਸਿੱਖ ਵਾਰਸ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਜੋ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕੰਟੈਕਸਟ ਕੀ ਸੀਗੀ ਯਾਨੀ ਕਿ ਬਿਫੋਰ ਦ ਵਾਰ ਜਦੋਂ ਜੰਗ ਹੋਈ ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਵੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਥੋੜੀ ਜਿਹੀ ਚਾਨਣਾ ਪਾਉਂਗੇ ਤਾਂ ਜਦੋਂ ਜੰਗ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਆਫਟਰਮਾਥ ਉਦੋਂ ਕੀ ਸਾਡੀ ਸਿੱਖ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਦਾ ਜਾਂ ਕੀ ਰਿਜ਼ਲਟ ਸੀਗਾ ਸੋ ਆਪਾਂ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਹੁਣ ਅੱਗੇ ਤੋਂ
How did Anglo-Sikh wars started?
It's a very good question, basically. I mean, at the start, you mentioned about Maharaja Ranjit Singh having the empire, the Sikh empire, so to speak. In 1839, when Maharaja Ranjit Singh passed away, from 1839 to 1845, the Punjab or the Lahore Darbar was in chaos, basically. There was assassinations, and it was a pretty big mess going on at this particular time. So, at this time, the British looking inside are thinking, well, hold on a second, this is not very good for us, or it's also an opportunity for us as well. Because if they're fighting amongst themselves, maybe we may be able to take some of their territories, for instance. But at the same time, the Sikhs are thinking, our army's getting powerful, how do we actually engage with the British? So in a way, it's very actually fascinating.
But were they tried and tested tactics? Because if you look at the British, the East India Company, they're in India 150 years before the Anglo-Sikh Wars. 100 years before the reign of Ranjit Singh. They're actually, moving their way through India. They're getting Maharajas, as it were, siding with one and then the other, and they're slowly using a divide and rule tactic, Qatar. And so is that what they're doing? They actually don't touch the... Yes, they've got up to the Satluj and there are treaties. There is a treaty with Ranjit Singh. But they daren't attack the Punjab until this moment. Were they waiting for Ranjit Singh's death? That's what the question I'm asking.
Well, I think if you look at the East India Company, they are a corporation. And their interest is finance.
But they've got a military as well.
So using their economic might, they've developed military to protect their military interests. They've also used that for finances to engage in local politics to get leaders that are supportive of them to increase their influence. Eventually, they've edged their way across most of India, taking control over it. Now, if we look at it from this point, at this point, they would not have attacked the Punjab had the Punjab not been in chaos, because the Punjab itself was an established empire with a very strong military, with a very strong economy, and so it would be foolish for them. It would be a very hard-fought war for them to come.
But what was the relationship like? Because I'm still intrigued. You've got this empire, and you've got the Satluj, and then you've got the Sikh empire going right up to Kabul, into Kashmir. Were they doing trade? Was it like the French and the British? Was it a convivial? Or what was going on?
I think there was...
Did they have ambassadors in Lahore? Did they have people there?
They would have had strong relationships with the Lahore Darbar.
Yeah.
And if you look at it from, again, a commercial perspective, the East India Company is going to act in its own best interests. So having a kingdom in between the Afghan state, which was at the time suspected of being in relations with the Russian Empire, the British were quite happy to have the Punjab Empire.
There's a kind of buffer.
So the British saw a sort of opportunity there, didn't they?
Yeah. So when it came to the Anglo-Afghan war, they got in touch with the Lahore Darbar and said, look, can we work together on this? And so they fought together, side by side, against the Afghanis. Now, because of the disarray that was created post-Maharaja Ranjit Singh and the lack of a succession planning, the Khalsa army at the time had expanded, almost tripled in size, to about 80,000 at that time. And because of this, lawlessness became quite prominent because lots of people were vying for power. And in this, the British saw an opportunity, the East India Company saw an opportunity to make some inroads into the Punjab. It sees it as not only an economic powerhouse, but a military powerhouse. So to gain some of that, they raided Toshkhana straight after. To gain some of that large bounty, they took the steps necessary. So we can't blame it all on the British side. We have to recognise that there were faults and problems in the Lahore Darbar, and the disarray that we were in created the opportunity for the British to strike.
So Tanji, what sort of weapons did they use to both sides?
What was?
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at. I think with the British, the Brown Bess gun, I think it was very popular. Used on both sides as well, and we've actually made models of this as well, so you'll be able to see. Obviously, we can't put a gun in there, but we've actually got one you can see on the screen.
So what was so unique about that gun then?
I think it was just very popular at the time, wasn't it? I think Gurinder knows more about it than I do. But yeah, it was one of the most popular guns at the time.
So the British had this gun.
The British had this gun,
so
but
what
also.
was the strength? I know that the Sikhs had cannons. I mean, they had Napoleonic.
That's right.
That caused a lot of damage to the First World.
And it's interesting because they call the cannons guns as well.
Yeah.
So toppe. So the guns were cannons as well. And it's interesting because the Sikhs had better cannons than the British actually.
Yeah.
They were firing better, and then the British accounts actually show that the Sikhs had better firepower. However, when we go into the causes,
let's show because I mean, what was the role of the French generals there? Because
Yeah.
you had the Napoleonic
exactly.
wars, and some of the weaponry was actually. Did Ranjit Singh buy it from the French, or was it commissioned?
No, it was actually what actually happened was that Maharaja Ranjit Singh had already been trying to gear up the military anyway. So he'd already been sourcing different kind of weaponry already in India, Pakistan, all the different various areas. So he'd already been building up his own military strength, so to speak. The reason for the generals is actually more about command, it's more about tactics, it's more about actually keeping Sikhs in a so kind of European line, so to speak, and the clothing as well. So therefore, when people like Ventura, Allard, and all these other European generals came on board, they actually brought some kind of order to the army. Not to say that it was in disarray, but it's just a different
Well, let me bring that a बहुत interesting चीज़ यार, because Taranjit, because I know you've made models of like Nihang warriors, but there is some suggestion that there was also a bit of a tension between the Akali Nihangs and their traditional kind of weaponry, and then you've got the French generals coming in imposing a new kind of military kind of order. And uniforms began.
I think there are stories of tensions between the Akalis and the more modern style kind of. But I think that Maharaja Ranjit Singh, in his kind of, to his credit, he kind of saw the advantage of both, because you had these Akalis who had great connection to their heritage and our fighting spirit, but then you also had these Europeans who could bring in a new kind of way of fighting, which they would actually need to fight the people like the British as well. So he kind of, to his credit, he kind of saw that and saw that actually we do need a varied, fighting force.
So Kartar, I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, when we think about war, we've been watching Second World War films, and we think about khakis and modern kind of warfare.
Yeah.
What was the battle? What was the kind of on the ground? What was that? Did you have kind of Akali Nihangs fighting alongside? Napoleonic kind of, what we're going to describe the kind of on the ground. I'm sure there are pictures there.
I think when we think about war, when we think of modern theatres of war, it's very different.
Is it hand-to-hand combat?
If you think of the old war theatres, military strategy was all about manoeuvres, command signals, and the trumpet in British armed forces was all about giving different sounds for different signals to the army so they knew what their movements were. So Maharaja Ranjit Singh's army would have been a selection of very different styles of warriors, from the ferocious, well-respected Akali Nihangs to the infantry, to the cavalry, to the artillery, which were called guns at the time, and they would have worked in unison. If you look at, if you take this back to Roman history, the three-line formation that the Romans used to use, again in a checkered way, was to make sure that when a person was attacking, that they had sufficient maneuverability to enable their forces to strike with most effect. That's what European tactics were all about. It was about line of fire, organising your fire, step forward fire, organising your retreats. That way you work as a collective fighting force, whereas if you look at the Akali Nihangs, they worked more as shock troops. They came in and they would send the enemy in complete disarray, and so each of them had a different style that they would contribute towards the fight. And the idea of a good general is to utilise each style, each soldier, each battalion to its most effect. And I think that's where the Sikh army was very successful.
So how big was the armies?
So the armies basically was really big. I mean, we talk about 50,000, 80,000. The numbers were actually expanding at a real rapid rate, like Kartar said as well. But the interesting thing about the army is...
Well, I mean, the figure I've got is that, when Ranjit Singh died, there were some 30,000 forces with 192 guns. But by the time we get to 1839, it was over 80,000. So there must have been... Was the recruiting from, we talked about the Afghans were joining in, the Kashmiris were joining in?
There was what you got to remember is that when we talk about the Sikh Empire or Khalsa Empire, we have to take into account what was the denominations there. So obviously you got to remember Maharaja Ranjit Singh had people of different faiths. He had Muslims in there, Hindus in there as part of his actual Darbar as well.
So there were different soldiers.
Exactly. So this was also played out like we talked about the European soldiers. So the gunners, for instance, so the ones who commanded the guns were normally under the Muslim troops, for instance. So we actually had Hindu troops as well, but like you had the Afghans on board as well.
But interestingly, they all kind of took on this Perava, you know, whether it was the Hindu Dogras.
Like the French, did they wear the star?
Yeah, they were, you know.
They would probably wouldn't have all the
Beards and
they
things.
wouldn't have all the beards, for instance.
Right.
But they also brought in their French flags as well. So
Oh,
if you
right,
notice,
right.
the flags are a very interesting source as well.
Well, yeah.
Because what we've found is that, as part of our research, is that
So-
we've found French
Yeah.
flags related to the
Right.
Anglo-Sikh Wars. And you know, we don't seem to find the flags that you think would be there, but we kind of.
But the psychology had to be right, because you're going to have these people who are going to, you know, die. They're going to fight in battle. You need to make them feel like they're fighting for a cause.
Definitely, yeah. And I think if you look at the logo as well,
Yeah.
which is beautifully designed by an artist in Birmingham, actually Kam Singh.
Yeah.
And if you look at that, if you look at the British soldier and the Sikh soldier, you know, we wanted to kind of show that, and if you look at the uniforms, very similar. So you got the pantaloons, the regalia,
The buttons and things like that,
buttons, and but the difference you see is like in the turbans and also in the Indian flags as well. And we don't really see any mention of like the Kanda style flags that we have today. So we've got very different styles of flags.
We're just going to go for a short break, and break to baad ਅਸੀਂ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ the two battles, we'll talk about the battles. So ਛੋਟੀ ਜਿਹੀ break ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਸੇ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਐਂਗਲੋ ਸਿੱਖ ਵਾਰ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਵਿਚਾਰ ਜਾਰੀ ਰੱਖਾਂਗੇ ਜੀ। ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ। The one show ਤੇ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ। Second half of the one show, we're going to go into the kind of two battles, the two wars, 1845 to 46, and then the second war. So ਆਪਾਂ ਮਨਜੀਤ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਹੁਣ ਕੀ ਹੋਇਆ, ਔਰ slide, you can see the slides as well. Yeah.
So Grinder, what happened in the battles?
Okay, so what we find is that after the actual disarray, we were talking about the Lahore Zabar, there was actual reasons why the British wanted to go to war and why the Sikhs wanted to go to war. But in a nutshell,
It was a short battle. The first one was relatively short.
Well, we're talking about a day here and then 2 days here, basically. So this is, we're talking about short days in terms of some of these battles.
And they were over. It was about 3 months. It was about 3.
Yeah, I mean, it started in December 18th, and that was the Battle of Mudki.
Yeah.
That's where the first actual battle actually took place, so where the Sikhs crossed the Satluj.
December is a cold. It's a winter, so it would have been cold. It would have been foggy.
That's correct, and it's interesting because as part of the battle, the British actually did a lot of friendly fire as well. It's really interesting because the British were killing their own people basically, because they weren't actually used to that kind of weather as well. What Sikhs is normal for them, even though the East India Company, like you said, had been in India for many years, but it was still actually not the best terrain for them to actually fight with the Sikhs.
And we're talking about it's the south of the Satluj.
That's correct.
It's that kind of area.
Yeah, so we're talking about Ludhiana.
Yeah.
Okay, so not too far from Ludhiana, and we're talking about
Firozpur, yeah.
Firozpur. So in between, okay. And Sobrawa. Okay, so all those areas there are right next to each other virtually.
ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਆਪਾਂ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪ ਖੁਦ ਉਸ ਇਲਾਕੇ ਦੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ, ਦੁਆਬੇ ਤੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਫਲੋਰ ਦੀ ਸਾਈਡ ਤੋਂ ਆ, ਤਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਫਲੋਰ ਤੋਂ ਟੱਪ ਜਾਓ ਤਾਂ ਇੱਧਰ ਆ ਜਾਓ ਤਾਂ ਉੱਥੇ the lot of the battles ਲੁਧਿਆਣਾ ਖੰਨਾ ਇਸ ਪਾਸੇ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਸੀਗੀਆਂ.
Yeah, so Mudki was the first battle. Okay, so that was just like almost like a day battle, so to speak. And what we tend to find is that our leaders, or the Sikh leaders, Raja Lal Singh and Tej Singh, had actually betrayed the Sikh forces essentially. They didn't actually turn up to the battle, so to speak. They sent all the original kind of fighters into battle, and then basically they retreated. There was one area of Firozpur which was, they could have easily attacked. It was under General Littler's command, and even they were kind of confused why the Sikhs didn't attack them. And then basically 2 days later, you start with the Battle of Firoz Shah. Now the Battle of Firoz Shah is probably one of the most interesting battles, not of Sikh history, but probably of British military history as well, because it's on that battlefield that Lord Hardinge, and Lord Gough were thinking of actually quitting the battlefield because they thought they were going to actually lose that particular battle. Now, what you've got to put this in...
They retreated. They started to retreat.
Well, it wasn't a case of retreating. They'd actually thought, because there was at night time, there was a lull between the first day. So what actually happened was they'd actually stopped the war, and due to night time, they were thinking they'd burnt the state papers. The sword that Lord Hardinge had actually got in the Battle of Waterloo had sent away because they didn't think they were going to make it to the next morning. So it just shows you how close we were to actually winning not just the Anglo-Sikh wars in that first instance, but where we could have dealt the British one of
But if
the
we could just
military blows of all
you might
time.
want to, I mean, Lal Singh's role is really critical here, because in a sense Lal Singh is the one that tips the advantage back to the British.
Yeah, if we look at it from a historical perspective, I think many of the British historians even said that had the Sikh generals been competent and not treacherous, the outcome of the battle would probably have been very different. I think the problem that arises here is within the Sikh camp, Lal Singh and Tej Singh have their own plan about post Lahore Darbar, Punjab, what it should look like, and they've already set in their mind to carve out a bit of land for themselves. So it's not just that they're fighting the British; they want to fight the British, but also make sure that they end up on top. And in that, they are expending a lot of the Khalsa army just to die, so that they can maintain their position.
Yeah.
And because of the communications, the British find themselves at an advantage. And many times, if we look at it, had the battle gone the other way, the momentum would have been on the Sikh side, and the British probably would not be able to rally back and hold back.
But just one other thing, I mean, you know, and if you can jump in, you know, you've got Pakhtuns fighting there, you've got Kashmiris fighting, and Sikh, all infantry, yeah? Are they mixed regiments? Are they kind of separate? Are they under different commands?
I mean,
something there going on?
in some cases there was a kind of mixed commands as well. Like I said earlier on, the gunners, for instance, was actually commanded by one of a very loyal kind of Muslim under Ranjit Singh's command, and he's actually had great command of the gunners. And what we understand is that when the
These were the
British,
European mercenaries that had the heavy artillery. They were the ones that were operating.
no,
So
I'm talking about the Muslims here.
Okay, yeah,
So they
the
were actually
Pakhtuns,
the gunners basically, and they fought to the death. They didn't actually leave those guns. They were actually found dead next to their
What
guns.
was their motivation? Was it loyalty to the Sikh Empire, or was it that they had their own kind of grievances with the British?
They would have had grievances with the British, but I think the key thing is they'd still had that loyalty to the old master, which was Maharaja Ranjit Singh. Despite all these other generals which had actually risen to the top, we still had individuals who had faith in the Lahore Darbar, or parts of it.
Was it a Khalsa army? Or was it a ragtag army? What was it?
Yeah,
Was it
no,
a
I mean,
Khalsa?
definitely. I mean, you've got to look at even in Guru Gobind Singh Ji's time. I mean, he had Muslim soldiers, Hindu soldiers in his army as well. So yeah, I would say they were Khalsa army. They were well trained. You know, they were well prepared, well armed, and I think that ultimately it was the treachery, you know, from within that really that lost it for us.
Yeah. So in December, the Sikhs crossed the Satluj.
Yeah.
But then if you move forward to February, you find the British actually making a counterattack,
Well, what
pushing them back.
Well, what you've got is after Feroz Shah, which was like the pivotal battle, again, like I said, the two kind of commanders let go of an advantage.
But Aliwal, the Battle of Aliwal is really critical here, isn't it?
It's critical as well, because Budaval is when we get the next general coming in, which is Ranjit Singh Majithia.
Yeah.
Okay, so he comes from a lineage of very great kind of soldiers in history as well. So he joins the battle at that particular point. So Budaval, he actually attacks Harry Smith's baggage train and takes all their ammunition. So that's considered an advantage, but what he doesn't do is he doesn't actually press on forward. The British say if he just pressed on forward, there would have been a different effect, and we would actually have got, again, we missed out on a big advantage there. So when we get to Aliwal...
Yeah, 28th of January, now we're into January.
Yes,
I mean, they're rapidly kind of one battle after the other,
That's right. So when we get to Aliwal, for instance, we get the charge of the 16th Lancers, for instance, okay? So they're known for actually charging with their lance, and we're going to have this lance in our exhibition as well. And we've got quite a bit from the 16th Lancers in our exhibition as well. But they were actually attacking what we call the Sikh squares. So the formation of the Khalsa army was in terms of a square, basically. And it's really interesting.
Amazing.
It's a really
That's very much like the Roman kind of, where they used to fight in this kind of very solid formation.
That's correct.
I mean, do we know anything about the kind of military tactics there? Was it hit and run, or was it much more of a European? I mean, was it a mixture of the two?
It would have been largely, if you look at the 1700s, 1800s, European armies were working to formation. So you had different formations, square formation, which is, you'd surround.
But the Nihangs were very much into the Jathas in small groups, and that was a tactic of the Nihangs.
But again, they would be used in a different part of the strategy. You'd have lines of fire. So as an enemy is charging, you'd have lines which would fire, and then as they duck down, the next line fires whilst they reload, and so there's a constant barrage of fire. So there's different strategies that were employed, but largely the Khalsa army would would have had European-style formations.
They would have.
But then if you look at the cavalry, for example, the British were quite clear in saying actually how skillful the Khalsa, the cavalry were, not only with their curved blades where they would duck down and take the strike of the European sword and curve back and strike and kill the English soldier with their sword. So they talked about these things in great detail about how effective the Khalsa army was in many cases.
Danjit, I mean, this is the era of guns and cannons, and heavy weapon, metal kind of swords. But what about bow? Were the Nihangs? Was there any role for bows and arrows?
I don't think at that time there was.
So they would have been obsolete at that time.
I think pretty much they were. I think you're looking at when they've got gun, basically the
chakras, so they would have been really.
No, I think they probably wouldn't be used because you've got these guns which the Sikhs were really effective with, and they would have been more effective with the guns than with bows and arrows. So
let me ask you. This is a tricky question. Is this the beginning of the demise of the Akali Nihang as a fighting force? I mean, let me ask you that. I have to put that question there.
It is because
are they now obsolete?
No. Let's just talk about this next battle, because the Battle of Sobrama, we actually have Shyam Singh Atariwal now entering the scene. Okay, so he didn't take part in the earlier battles. But with him is also dispatched Akali Hanuman Singh, who was the next leader after Akali Fulla Singh. So what we've got now is
this is in Sobrama. This is where Gough and Smith actually come together. The divisions come together.
The divisions come together, and what we find now is that because of the treachery, the Nihangs are right at the front, basically. Most of them are getting wiped out now. But what happens is Akali Hanuman Singh leaves the battlefield after a certain while and is actually chased all the way down to Patiala. Okay. So there's another skirmish. This is almost like a lost battle because the British.
That's in the opposite direction. He's been chasing the opposite direction.
They're going all the way to Patiala now. Unfortunately, because Patiala was in collusion with the British, they fired their guns on them, and half the Nihangs were actually massacred in where Gurdwara Dukhnawar now stands, basically. But it's actually covered up by the Patiala Rajas, actually. So then what we have is, from that particular point, with the band of Singhs that were with Akali Hanuman Singh, he gets to a place called Sohana, which is in Chandigarh, and that's where he became Shaheed. But what they all say is that this was actually the pivotal point where the Nahang firepower had actually gone down to its weakest level. So that's why when the next Nahang Jathdars had to contemplate of going to Huzur Sahib to get their kind of military strength back up before they went back up into the Punjab again. But so Brahma actually broke the back of the...
I think the other thing to bear in mind here, because when we think about warfare and conquest, the map shows huge kind of territories of the British territory, the Afghan, but in reality, what you controlled was where your forces were. So even though the Nihang, he's going down to Patiala, it's not as if they're hostile people there, the villagers and people there. There would still be people who might themselves be fed up of the British. So it's not a question of you're in foreign territory or anything like that.
No, it usually means that the main force in that area is either friendly towards you, hostile towards you. That could mean that they put out a statement to their people to say, do not aid these people, do not support these people.
But there still would be people who take them in who would still,
there would have been, and this is why you probably look at, again with the Nahang tradition, so many of them were killed in this battle that therefore the Nahangs would have had to regroup and rebuild their military strength. Another very interesting thing that I found through this project is the tension that exists between Lal Singh, Tej Singh and the Sikhs under his command. Now every soldier is loyal to their commander, but we see a growing tension here because many of the Sikhs are looking at the military decisions that are being made and they're feeling frustrated because either they're seeing very poor decision making or they're seeing indifference from their leadership, and so they start pushing them. I think it is in Brattle Feroz Shah when I think Tej Singh comes onto the scene. It's only because he's been pushed to go, and even then he doesn't commit to battle.
But then so we are now at the end of the battle there, and Tej Singh himself actually then sides with the British.
Well, he didn't side as such.
This is where the Dogra issue comes in. Now, some people said that the Dogras were Hindus who had taken on Sikhi, but their real motive was money in the treasury and the Toshakhanas and things.
So Tej Singh, Lal Singh had basically, like I said, left the battlefield. But then when the first treaty was actually initiated, they were actually looking for power for themselves.
That was the Lahore Treaty of 9th of March,
That's right. And then what we've got is Gulab Singh who did not take part in the Anglo-Sikh Wars, trying to carve up an empire for himself as well. So he takes on Kashmir, for instance, because remember, the Sikhs had to pay indemnity for the actual actions which had taken place. So what we're finding now,
7.5 million rupees that he was
That's-
paying.
that's
And in those
what
days,
they
that
say.
would have been a lot of
a
money.
lot of money, a lot
Yeah,
of money.
yeah.
So you've got to remember
Can
they had to
imagine.
carve out Kashmir to actually
And
pay
also,
for
about
it.
that, he was given Jammu and Kashmir as well.
That's right.
So,
So-
he this is win-win for him, wasn't it?
It was absolutely win-win for him because he was a politically astute in terms of how he didn't enter the battlefield, but he wound up with half a kingdom. It's unbelievable.
And then you've got the ruler of Punjab. I mean, remember, it's still at the time, you know, it's still an independent kingdom. You know, we've got the Lahore Treaty, and technically, I mean, the Leap Singh is the ruler of the Punjab, and Rani Jinda, but she's exiled then. So
She does get exiled at that particular point, and it's interesting because Dalip Singh is obviously, you know, not in a super position to be actually commanding because he's only a young age. So he was actually looking towards the regents and advisors to kind of help him through, etc. But the important bit is when we now get onto the second Anglo-Sikh War, because what we're finding is the British kind of power base is actually annoying the Sikhs as they would do because.
But what can the Sikh community and the British community learn about the Anglo-Sikh Wars?
Yeah.
I mean, what they can learn about it is basically, you know, it's interesting to note that there was disunity on both sides as well, even from the British side, because you had Lord Gough, for instance, being questioned by Lord Hardinge. For instance, they were questioning each other's battle tactics. The Sikhs were questioning their own battle tactics. But I think what we both.
But just to
communities
complete the
together-
kind of a story, you know, the second one is much shorter in a sense. It's a different theatre of war, isn't it?
It is a different, well, it's two theatres of war because
Yeah.
what we have is it's the
It's
Battle of
moved from the
Multan.
Satluj. It's moved
Yeah.
from the Satluj.
So we get to the Multan now.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got Divan Muraj, who's the Hindu ruler at this particular point, and what happens is two British soldiers go there to get the taxes, and basically as they were getting the keys and getting the taxes, they get killed. So this starts off a chain of events, starts off the second Anglo-Sikh War. But interestingly, the Battle of Multan is a siege which lasts for almost 10 months. Basically, starts in April and ends, way into the final year. But at the same time, Raja Sher Singh now enters the scene. Okay, Atariwala.
Well, so you've got Sher Singh entering from the Sikh side, but you've also got you've got the Bombay European regiments coming up.
You've got regiments coming up from Bombay as well.
But it's not just the Bengalis now; they're bringing in other.
They've brought them in the first war as well, but in the second Anglo-Sikh War, the British are actually bringing as many regiments as they can because this time they want to actually they want to get to annexation essentially. So when Raja Sher Singh enters the scene, aided with his father Chapta Singh Atariwala as well, we've got different generals in command again, this time from the Sikh side. So the battles that we're looking at now is Ramnagar, okay? And then we're also looking at the Battle of Jallianwala, which is a very, very epic point. Jallianwala is very similar to Feroz Shah in a sense. Again, the British are thinking, hold on a second, we're not going to do really well out of this. But again, circumstances take their course, and then we get to the final battle, is the Battle of Gujarat.
Yeah.
This is where the Sikhs do
It's a Rawalpindi that they actually then surrender.
They do surrender in Rawalpindi. But what we
And of course, the Afghans then kind of abandon, and then they go back.
They do, but what we do find is, even though at Rawalpindi the Sikhs are actually delivering their swords, we've still got pockets of resistance. By Maharaj Singh, for instance, is still going to fight the Sikhs. The Nihangs that were left, some of them that were left, they were still taking on this battle to the British as well. So when we do get to the final treaty and we get to annexation, you've still got pockets around the Punjab, for instance, outside of Punjab, who are still trying to fight off the British wherever they can.
So now we've got to that, and then we know about the Lahore Treaty, then we know about what happens to Jind Kaur and the Leap Singh. But what's happening to the kind of Sikh forces? What's are they going back to their villages? Or are they now being recruited by the British, co-opted? What's going on?
I think there's a period of stabilisation that the British take into place. They look at the situation, they say, now we've got to stabilise Punjab, we've got to stabilise our control. So that's their first aim. Then we go on to professionalising the army. The British then decide to create a professional army with a pay structure and a scale, and it started to invite those soldiers who would have fought for the Sikh empire to say, okay, you now are unemployed. we will offer you employment, we will give you a better wage. And actually, I think even in the British Indian Army, Sikhs were given one rank higher than any other soldier, just to give them one, an incentive, but also recognition that they come from a community.
But
that has
was it
military prowess.
also a fear that if we don't kind of give them favours, then they might regroup and then there might be the third Anglo-Sikh War?
There was quite a big possibility
Rebellions.
of that. Yeah, there could have been a
Because we had the, we had the rebellion anyway.
The mutiny in 1857.
1857, which is only 10 years afterwards, and the Sikhs were very loyal to the British. They had put down the mutiny, so they must have done something to the Sikhs to win their hearts and minds.
I think partly there would have been that, but I partly think the idea of taking out the Mughal Empire once and for all was quite an attractive prospect. So if we look at it when they attacked Delhi, they actually executed Bahadur Shah II's two sons, and that was under the Sikhs and the British officer. So I think that it's recognised that it may not have been just enticement by the British, but also the many years of conflict with the Mughals that would have encouraged them to side with the British.
There was also revenge as well for their involvement in the Anglo-Sikh Wars as well.
Yes.
Yeah, but the morale of this, I mean, as I say, when we look at the oral traditions, and I've heard there, I think Dilber's amazing kind of, he talks about the Sikhs, Hargate, they were defeated, and were they broken? Were the Sikhs, I mean, in a sense, we haven't really been able to rise since, although we had this glorious period in the British Indian Army.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think like Gurinder was saying,
things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the way Gurinder was saying, you had Sikhs on both sides as well. So it's not just like a one-sided battle, and then the Sikh Empire, I think the Sikh Empire was in decline after Maharaja Ranjit Singh anyway. So I mean, it's how you really take it, really. But it was. In one sense, it was kind of Maharaja's Bana as well, and what happened. The
so
Sikhs
what are I mean, we are coming to kind of the last 10 minutes of the show. I mean, we talk about our sovereignty today. Asi gal karde hain, azadi di gal bhi karde hain. What lessons can we take from this, this period, really?
I think there's echoes of what happened then. It's like we really need to look at this period, because we're seeing the same things happening again, where you have this infighting within the Sikhs, we're not working together, and we're being divided, and then there's a lot of kind of treachery or mistrust of each other. And I think this is one really important thing that we need to learn from this. We could have won those wars had we been together, united.
And the Dogra is like a metaphor now, isn't it? If anybody kind of seems to go, but I mean, have the Dogras been given an unfair kind of representation?
No.
Are they any worse than anybody else?
No, I think we have to recognise the treachery that they were complicit in. I think the real lesson for us to learn is very much what Baji said. It's looking at the idea of the internal threat rather than the external threat. If the Punjab, the Lahore Darbar wasn't in disarray, the British would not have had opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to reflect upon what it means to be the master of our own destiny, but also how it means
so we have to discover ourselves still.
But maybe, I mean, the Sikhs were never really united. We had the missiles.
Yeah.
And they were staunchly independent, all the the leaders. So maybe it was a case that it's almost like it wasn't as if we were unified and when we broke. We were always a bit kind of.
But what Maharaja Ranjit Singh did was he actually created stability.
He created stability.
Yeah, he created stability.
What was his magic then?
I think it's twofold, threefold basically. It was like essentially actually absorbing the missiles, okay? Also marriage as well, having relations with various families as well.
Which is why he had so many wives.
Did he have 5 wives or
not more than that?
6?
There was many.
But the argument here is that Ranjit Singh was partly using that tactically, but it's kind of partly he was kind of he had a very open heart as well.
He did, and the interesting thing about it is that whilst he was able to actually, like you said, use tactics amongst the Sikhs, but he was able to employ people in the right places. I mean, the Huns was over here. Hari Singh Nalwar was actually sent on a certain place. So he was using his actual commanders and leaders in strategic way, which after his death, he was unable to do that, you see.
Kartar, one thing we don't really know much about is, I mean, this is a huge kingdom. And it's said that the Punjab Darbar was the wealthiest in all of India, and that's partly why the British wanted to go there. It was the Silk Route, the Tosha Khana. But Ranjit Singh must have had, kind of allegiances outside of Punjab. He must have had an embassy, well, not embassies as such, but So what happened to all those kind of support systems? Did they all just melt away, or what? You know,
Well,
we seem to be very isolated Sikhs now. We have no outposts for to support us. You know.
Well, I think what it is, you have to firstly build stability in your own area. For me, one of the things when I look at Punjab now, one of the things that's most important to me is building economic and social stability.
But we
Only when you
constantly
have-
look into Delhi, constantly saying Delhi tusi karta. We swear at them, and then we said tusi sanu justice devo. The Sikhs took their own justice in there. So we are now in that sense Ghulam, aren't we?
I think the mindset of the Sikhs in that era, if we look at the Misl period and the Misl period moving forward, if you look at the reorganisation of the Khalsa Panth at that time, they very much were the idea of we are the masters of our own destiny, we can change and shape our own future,
Yeah.
and we take responsibility for the things that we can change.
Yeah.
And jo baki hega oh
Theek hai.
maar de hath hai.
Last couple of minutes, Taranjeet, what is it that motivates you to do this kind of work? What is it that you want the youth to go away with? What, to become militant or military, or just to have a
No,
sense of their history?
I think it's to understand what's happened in the past, learn from those mistakes, and to try to not make mistakes again. Because if you look at ourselves at the moment, we are kind of in the same situation where we have good soldiers, but we just don't have good leaders. Or we have leaders who are betraying us. So I think it's about us kind of building our own leaders from our own communities, people who we've grown up with, people who we trust, and making sure that there is this kind of unity and selflessness, you know, in moving forward.
Grinder, how can people get involved?
Okay, so like we said at the
Last
start,
minute, yeah.
start of the show, we've got this exhibition running at the Newark Houses Museum in Leicester, which is opposite De Montfort University. Runs from the 11th of March to the 4th of June. We've got 6 good speakers talking about different aspects of the Anglo-Sikh Wars. We've got arts and crafts activities as well. And for everyone to get in contact with us and come and visit the exhibition, because there'll be different relics and artifacts on display. There'll be the history that we just kind of talked about as well. There'll be some interesting
I mean, this is the opportunity now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is the first time,
Yeah.
as far as we know, that anyone has actually done a project on this kind of scale related to the Anglo-Sikh Wars.
Kartar,
in the UK.
we often, when we think about museums, we think about kind of dusty, kind of quiet places. But is there some activities for youth? What about? I mean, I'm thinking about the Punjabi schools. Maybe can they get involved? Is there any?
Well, we've got several talks, we've got arts and crafts activities that they can
So
get
there will be
involved
arts
in.
and crafts as well.
There will be.
To keep them busy, yeah.
But also, it's an opportunity just to go to the museum. I think the idea of going to a museum and being kurji, being interesting, being inquisitive is very important for our community.
Definitely.
Because there's so much to learn.
So it's the Newark House Museum, which is very near the railway station in Leicester.
No.
De Montfort University.
It's near De Montfort
Oh,
University.
De Montfort
It's on the
University,
side.
yeah.
But it's only 10 minutes
Yeah.
walk from...
So ek war main fir dasdama, this is the Anglo-Sikh Wars, Battles, Treaties and Relics 1845 to 1849. ਇਹ 11 ਮਾਰਚ ਨੂੰ ਐਗਜ਼ੀਬਿਸ਼ਨ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਹੋਣਾ 4 ਜੂਨ ਤੱਕ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਾ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ ਔਰ ਨਾਲ ਲੈਕਚਰਸ ਵੀ ਕੀ ਹੋਣੇ ਤੇ ਵੈਬਸਾਈਟ ਤੇ ਜਾ ਕੇ you can get all the information. So ਅੱਜ ਦਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਇੱਥੇ ਸਮਾਪਤ ਆ. I think we've kind of covered quite a lot in a very short period.
Want to thank you all
Thanks for coming.
down.
Yeah, and you know, ਆਪਾਂ ਕੁਝ ਸਿੱਖਿਆ ਲੈ ਲਈ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਸਾਡੀ ਇੰਨੀ ਗਲੋਰੀਅਸ ਹਿਸਟਰੀ ਹੈ. ਠੀਕ ਹੈ, ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਹਾਰ ਵੀ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਤਾਂ ਉਹ ਚੋਂ ਵੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੁਝ ਸਿੱਖ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ. And you know, so there's a lot of material on the web. ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਦੱਸੋ. Educate the next generation, not to become militant but to have a sense of your history, so that we have confidence as Sikhs in this modern world. Fateh Bulana ji,
Waheguru ji ka Khalsa,
Waheguru ji ki Fateh.